Good morning. Well, I want to welcome you to a talk by Mikel Grabocka, and he will be presenting to us on navigating the implementation rollout of passwordless authentication. A couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please submit them through the app. I'm going to be using the app to moderate the questions that we ask. If for some reason you don't get it into the app, we will have the mic available for questions for Q&A at the end if there's time. So we'll have you come up so that we actually get that for the recording. Thank you for joining us this morning. And with that, I will turn it over to Mikel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So today I'll be talking about how we did implement and roll out the passwordless within Workforce. So I'm Mikel Grabocka. I'm a security architect responsible for identity and trust at SMG. So SMG stands for Swiss Marketplace Group, and it's a group of marketplaces out of Switzerland. Myself, I'm responsible for identity on Workforce side and customer, and then on customer side also for trust, which is one of our biggest assets considering we're marketplaces. So people need to have trust in the brands in order to use the product, basically. So what I'll be talking about today, 3 main points. So why FIDO for SMG? So in this talk, you're not going to hear why FIDO, so what problems we have with passwords. Hopefully by now we all know that. And then what was our journey and what did we learn about it? What were things we found out, maybe mistakes, so that you don't have to repeat them? And what do we have planning for the future? So I'm going to start with our identity vision. So why FIDO for SMG? Well, 2 main pillars of our identity visions are the following. First, we want to offer seamless and secure passwordless authentication, both on Workforce side and on customer side. And then the second part is we are risk-based. We want to raise the bar based on the risk of the current authentication. So why challenge the user with very strong factors when it's not needed? So do that only when the risk tells you so. And this is also the reason why we are part of the FIDO Alliance. So clearly we are not a vendor. We do not sell authentication solution, but we believe in what the Alliance is doing and we wanted to support that. So we've been a sponsor member since quite some time. So let's start with the first part of the vision. So offer seamless and secure passwordless authentication. What does that mean? Well, there are 2 parts to it, right? First, we want to offer better UX for our employees, which means passwordless. Let's take 1 step out of the journey. But also we wanted to increase the level of security, which is the phishing-resistant bit of it. And this leads us to a target state of FIDO passwordless authentication. This is the first part of the vision that I just showed. What about the second one? So raising the bar based on the risk, right? So we have a risk-based approach, as I mentioned, and we base it on 3 pillars. First is the assurance level, then we have the authentication methods, and then the device posture. So what does this mean? What does an assurance level mean? Well, we don't want to treat the users differently when they are trying to log in as administrators of our cloud providers, and differently when they go to a software app when they book a desk on our open space environment, right? So there are 2 parts to it. First is the information classification of the app or the resource. Is this an HR system? Is this a financial system? So is the information public, internal, confidential, or strictly confidential? And then what is the role of the user in this resource? Is it a read-only? Can they change things, or are they an admin? With a combination of the 2, we can derive an assurance level required for this resource. On the second bit, we have the authentication. So like every organization at the moment, or most organizations at the moment, we don't only have passwordless. We also have an authentication journey that it requires password. So we have password and a traditional MFA, and then we have passwordless with FIDO, be it in a YubiKey or in a physical key, or be it embedded on a device. And last but not least is the device posture. So it's an enterprise environment at the end of the day, right? So we want to be able to recognize whether the user is coming from a managed device that we have issued or from a BYOD. Combining the 2, it leads us to the following. If you are trying to access a resource that has more than public information and you have rights more than read-only, you will have to come from a managed device and log in passwordless. So bringing the 2 parts of the vision, what is the target state now? So we said better UX, passwordless, higher security. In the beginning, it was only phishing resistant. Now we add one more layer. It's also managed devices, which leads us to FIDO passwordless on managed devices. So this is our target state for the rollout of passwordless within our workforce environment. So how did we do it? So these are the main phases of our journey, and I will cover them one by one. So we started with the design phase. We had the implementation, piloting, awareness, the rollout, and actually the ramp up of this rollout 100%. So design, what does this mean? Well, you have to, what I described earlier, right? So what is out there? What do we currently have? And here you have to take a lot of time to really understand all the details of what's within, right? And starting from then, this is the current state. You also design the target state, right? So where do we want to go? What is our vision? And what are we aiming for? Then you start the implementation. Based on the concept, based on the target state, you start implementing it. But of course, things are not perfect, so you're going to have to adjust during the implementation. Two key parts here is document what you're doing, because sometimes priorities change, so you might have to park this project or pause it at the moment and then come back. But then when you come back, nobody remembers where it was left off and what is the current implementation, so you start assuming. So document that, and also document what you expect from the user in this current stage. We called it manuals, and they were both written, but also video manuals, which they helped us a lot in the rollout phase, because if the user had questions, they wouldn't go directly to Help Center, but they would first have the manual. So read the manual first, look at the video. You have one for Windows, one for Mac, any platform that we have, all the steps that they needed to do in order to be there. If they did all of that and nothing worked, then of course the Help Desk Center was there to help them. Then piloting. So, okay, we implemented it, assumed everything worked, everything fine, right? You have to pilot. This was one of the key phases. So how did we do this? We started from the very core team, the security and the identity team who designed it and implemented it. We were part of it. We wanted to see it, but also we wanted to test it, to try to break it. And then we expanded to more people, IT, help desk. They were the ones that were going to help the people, right? So they needed to know where the problems lied or what to expect from it. And after that one, we expanded to a bigger group, not by department, but by people who were interested in trying these new things out. And I'm sure you have engineers who are going to be interested in joining that part. For the better, so to help you get there, or for the worse, trying to break it. What you are doing doesn't make sense, right? And this was not a straight line. This was a continuous back and forth. So almost every day something would break, but it was a controlled group, right? This was kind of an alpha or a closed beta. They were expecting it to fail. But overall, we didn't impact productivity. I'm happy to say so. Awareness. So I put awareness after the pilot phase, but actually awareness is a bit everywhere. So it's not that you do it once and it's done. You do it all the time. And I'm going to cover it a bit later how you do that, or how we did that. So definitely there were some campaigns. That's why there's one step that's awareness. So now we need people to be more aware about this topic. But then we have talks throughout the year to make people aware in our organization. We even went and came up with some merchandise, because in every conference people love merch, right? So it's something you like, something you maybe, it resonates with you. So we did the same for employees, and it was very well welcomed. Then the rollout. So we worked on these authentication policies, so it's time to roll them out, right? So we rolled out to everybody after the pilot group. So the pilot group was in a controlled group. Then we rolled out to everyone. Just like it was mentioned in the previous talk here, you don't go from 0 to 100 with a flip of a switch, right? We went day by day, not by departments again, but by groups, maybe roll out to 50 a day in the first week, just to make sure that everything works, then in batches of 100, and when we were past the 50 or 70% point of all employees, then we just released to everybody. And last but not least is the ramp up. So in how we did it, rolling out 100% doesn't mean that 100% of users were on passwordless, and I'm going to cover that in a bit. So now we are at the phase where we're ramping up. So at the moment, we are right in between there. So we rolled out 100% of the users. Now we are working on getting 100% of the users in passwordless. So before entering more details, some numbers that might be interesting. 15% of our users, of our employees, adopted FIDO technologies without ever talking about passwordless. So we offered it as MFA. They started asking for FIDO keys or started enrolling their Touch IDs from the laptop. So this was natural adoption from them. And of course, this is mainly engineering or tech-savvy people that will do that. Then, after the rollout phase, we had 30% of the users adopt passwordless within the first month. I'm saying eligible users here because, as I mentioned, this is rolled out to everybody, but not everybody is on passwordless at the moment. The reason for this is that our rollout included an opt-in phase, which is where we are at the moment, and then it will have a mandatory phase, which will lead us to 100% of the users being on passwordless. What does this mean? So it's a combination between passwordless and risk-based, right? By the end of the year, we're going to enforce the fact that if you go to an app that has sensitive data, you have to come from a managed device, thus have to log in passwordless, and every employee has access to at least such an app, which will mean that by the end of the year, everybody will be on passwordless authentication. So some key highlights of our journey. Main challenges. Well, as you saw, we needed really granular implementation of this thing, right? We based it on the user role, on the resource, on the user role, on the resource, which is also a key distinction, on the classification of such resource, on the fact that if the device was managed or not, and on authentication methods. So we really had some challenges there with our IAM vendor to figure out what was the best way. And the interesting thing was, once we figured out, so there were many problems. Once we would figure out any problem, in a month or two, they would roll out a feature that would have made our life so much easier if it was available 2-3 months ago. Then, one main change was the login domain change. So we know that all the FIDO credentials are domain bound, right? So mid-journey, we decided we were going to change the login domain the login domain. So this kind of set us back quite a bit because we lost a big part of the adoption that we had with the people. So we had to, mid-journey, come up with a migration only for the credentials. So apart from all the difficulties of the journey to go passwordless, we also had to deal with a drop in users who had FIDO credentials. Then vendor breaking changes. Well, most of our stuff is outsourced. We use vendors for the IAM, for our PKI infrastructure, and for the MDM. If any of those would break, because of our model that I described earlier, this thing would fail. All of them broke at some point in time. So there was around 2 to 3 months that we were just dealing with vendor breaking changes. So IAM made a change that made it incompatible with the rest. Then we had the problem with the PKI vendor, and then we had the problem with the MDM vendor. Once that stabilized, things came back on track. So what about the awareness? At SMG, we have a very important October month, which is happening also while I'm here on stage, which is the cybersecurity month. We have a lot of talks, we have a lot of workshops, we have a lot of presentations just to make people aware of security. What does it mean for our business? What does it mean for SMG? Then we had manuals, as I mentioned, written and recorded manuals. And we also had ambassadors. As I mentioned in the beginning, in the pilot phase, we had also people that were engineers, maybe people from HR, maybe people from payroll if they were interested. So it's not only the security guys or IT guys that are talking to you about it, but actually it's your colleague in your team talking to you about it, and how nice this is, and what is their experience, and so on and so forth. So what were some key learnings? Well, pilot phase is essential. Things will break, expect them to break, and expect to be agile. You have to test and iterate. It is a lot of testing and iteration during the pilot phase, but you can also expect that to happen afterwards. But piloting is the most important one. Definitely it is a journey. And it's an interesting one, but very challenging. As I said, all the vendors made the change that was breaking. We never expected that to be the most challenging part of the journey. When we started this project, there was no indication whatsoever that we were ever going to change the domain, the login domain for our employees, right? Then the last bit is What about the user incentive? Why would somebody who's not interested and doesn't care about authentication care about this thing, right? So what's in it for them? At the moment, as I said, one of the numbers was 30% of the users implemented it within the first month without strong nudging. So this was a company-wide communication, and that's all what it was. We haven't started yet to strongly nudge them via emails, via more campaigns or nudging that we can do, that we have done on the customer side, and we plan on adopting them. So the user experience was one of the main drivers why people jumped on passwordless and are using it at the moment. So this is where we stand. Our future outlook has two key parts. One which is FIDO related. As I said, we aim that by the end of the year to have 100% of users on passwordless. And what is dragging us along here is not FIDO, the technology or the implementation that we have, but it's rather the adoption of MDM. So we don't have 100% of users on MDM, and we're going to enforce that. And because our passwordless journey was combined with our required MDM devices, it had an impact. So once we have users on MDM, they are also going to be on passwordless. And another part for that is going to be the risk-based. So at the moment, we are basing it in a lot of factors, but we believe we can do better. What does that mean? So user context. At the moment, we are considering the role of the user in the resource, but we could consider the role of the user in the organization. Probably a C-level executive, we might want to treat differently from other employees, or somebody working at the customer care because they have a lot of assets, we might want to consider and treat them differently. And the other bit that we want to look into is the device assurance. So far we are looking whether the device is managed or not, but there are so much more entry points that we can consider. Does the device have an EDR? What is the EDR telling us? Is the software up to date? Or is the software not up to date? Maybe we don't have any information at all. So these are more touch points that we want to add to this journey, which is a passwordless journey. But in the enterprise scope, we also want to get more signals around the user context, the device context, the resource context that the user is trying to access. With that, I'm going to thank you and open the floor for questions if there are any.
So we do have two questions for you. The first one is, how long did the rollout journey take, and how fast or slow did you move, and why?
So the rollout took around 2 or 3 weeks. We did a few things. So we rolled out silently to everyone to see where the problems were going to pop up. And that gave us, and we did that 2 or 3 days before the official rollout. Once we got the confidence that there was no problem with the silent rollout, we publicly communicated to everyone that now this thing is happening. But also, as I said, we didn't flip the switch. We started day by day. The first week, it was 50 people a day, monitoring with help desk what it would mean for them. Are people contacting you? So roughly the first week, we had 200 or 300 people, because we also had the pilot group who was already deployed, right? Then in the second week, we started going 100 people a day. And after the second week, we also gave it the weekend to see when people come back on Monday. So it was a 2-week span. Maybe somebody was on vacation or whatever reason. And then when we came back after the weekend, we rolled out to everyone.
Great. So the next question is, how did you manage your opt-in process?
That's a very good question. So the opt-in process is completely self-service. What does this mean? So as I said, the policies are rolled out to 100%. We don't need to change anything for more people to come in. Everything is documented, so we have wiki pages and the videos. So if somebody is interested into jumping into that, we point them first to the documentation and make sure that they can reach out if they need help. So the opt-in process means probably somebody needs to be on MDM. So that was the main challenge. Are you on an MDM device or not? Because so far it was not enforced. And they can go through the manuals on how to get on the MDM. Then if they are there, there might be some things like, for example, what how are we recognizing the fact that the device is MDM'd, right? So maybe there's something there where we could help. So the opt-in process was quite easy for us and the team managing the rollout because we didn't have to do much. It was rather all the testing that we did beforehand to see what could break, and based on the symptoms that the employees would describe, what could be the potential problem.
Great. So we've got a whole bunch of questions starting to stream in now. So we're going to go until we run on our time limit. But the next question is, when changing to your new login domain, how did you repurpose or migrate existing passkeys from the old domain?
So this was one of the most challenging bits because, as I said, we started with 15% of employees being on FIDO credentials for MFA. Then we slowly started increasing that by changing authentication policies or enrollment policies, by having some campaigns, and then at some point we decided to change the login domain, and this set us back. What we did is it was a small migration flow for the people that were on or that had FIDO credentials, so they got different communication emails from the rest of the company. So everybody got the email that starting from this date, we're going to have this new domain, and the ones that we could identify from IAM, actually, we could identify who were the people having these credentials, got a different email. So for the first group of the people, it was, this is the new domain, it's completely transparent to them, right? They don't have to do anything. For the users with the FIDO credential, it was like, this is the new domain, but you are doing things right, actually. You are using FIDO credentials, and we need you to do something here. So we asked them to first voluntarily change the FIDO key, so go enroll a new one and unenroll the previous one, or at least enroll the new one, and then by the date of the migration, we would delete the previous one for them. And there was also a small part of them who couldn't do this change. Maybe they were away, maybe they had deadlines to meet, so this was not their priority. And we did them on their behalf, meaning the day of the change, we removed their previous FIDO credentials, and on the next login, successful login, they were asked to enroll a new credential.
Okay, great. So one of the questions is on recovery. So if you've tied passwordless to a managed device and that managed device is lost, what does recovery look like for that user?
That's a great question. So when a managed device is lost, I think we don't only trigger the MFA reset flow, but we also have a lost device, right? So it's a much bigger problem. So we deal with those things together. And also another thing that we did is, as I presented, if you go to a resource that needs a medium or high assurance, you must log in passwordless, but this doesn't mean that we phased out all the other MFAs. We are not using them, but they are there, which means that for a lot of users, we can reuse other MFAs that they have enrolled to cover these problems in the recovery state.
And I think that actually dovetails really nicely into the next question, which was, how do you handle your break glass solution for users? So you said you had your recovery options still, or other methods still available. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. One of the questions I think might be a good one to dive into is, did you and your team do this all in-house, or did you have other vendors that provided resources? And if so, how did that work for you?
Thank you for that question. That's very interesting. So we outsource. We have vendors for the product, but the implementation was completely done in-house. And I'm happy to say that all of this was done, apart from myself as an architect who designed all the process and followed it closely, from one IAM engineer. So we did all of this with one person who implemented everything. Of course, when we needed support for the PKI or MDM, we would go to the team handling that, even though we got pretty much involved also on those areas. But we did all the implementation and the testing with one person.
Awesome. So one final question, we'll let you off the hot seat. It said, how did you manage people to adopt biometrics for authentication? Or are users mostly using PIN?
So for that one, out of my experience in the field and also on MFA rollouts, especially on the customer side, most of the people, and also it was just like it was said on stage, most of the people will adopt biometrics. It's not a problem. So I would say roughly you can assume that roughly 80–90% of the users will have biometric adopted, and the rest of them we just serve with a PIN or a password. So from the IAM point of view, it's still a passwordless journey, but the PIN or the password is just user presence verification locally to make sure that you can access those credentials.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mikel. Yeah, this has been a great presentation, and yeah, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you out in the coffee.
Thank you.